Hello everyone, and welcome to the LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga Speedrunning full tutorial for any %. This is going to be the first part, otherwise known as Part 0, a little bit of a preface to the actual full tutorial on every level, but we're going to cover things like controls, consoles, technical stuff, setup, rules, and just the overall details within the run. In this video, myself, Zach, and E. Roadhouse will be explaining the basics that you'll need to know to get started on learning any %. After this video, you'll find a playlist with all 36 levels explained individually, in depth, for both a beginner, a mid-level runner, and even a high-level runner alike. I highly recommend watching all of them and making sure you're comfortable with every level in the game, but you can always come back to these to brush up on anything you're unclear on. TCS is really a gem of a speed game. It's very easy to start out with, even as a first speed game, and it has a super high skill ceiling, and there's a lot of flexibility, but I think this tutorial is very, very much geared for people who are just getting into the game. And if you have any questions, of course, use these resources that we explain later in this video. The Discord is a very important one, and there are lots of resources we provide. With that said, let's get into the video.
Alright, so starting out with some of the version differences and platforms, we have it set up on the leaderboard to where every platform is separated. So we've got the PC leaderboard here, and then we've got the Wii leaderboard here. And then Xbox, PlayStation, mobile, and so on. The reason we have this is that there are some major differences between each platform. So for example, PC is the fastest version. It's mainly due to load times, and then the next few consoles, we're not too sure on the timings, but for example, Wii, it does have some exclusive platform differences compared to PC, such as you get fast build and fast force by shaking the Wiimotes and the nunchucks, and then you also get exploding blaster bolts in ship levels, which save a lot of time in that level. Xbox has some differences with hitbox warps and death warps, which are very useful in free play categories. And not too much is known about PlayStation, but it is still separated. And then mobile is its whole own thing. Mobile can skip cutscenes, so it is a lot faster than the other consoles, but that is pretty much the version differences.
So I do want to cover the different control setups that all of the top runners do use, just to emphasize really how little it matters what you choose. If we start at first place, that is a double keyboard player. However, second place is a controller keyboard player, and third place, another double keyboard player. Fourth place, another double keyboard player. Fifth place, controller keyboard. Sixth place, double keyboard. Seventh place, controller keyboard. You get the idea. It really doesn't matter what you choose. However, once you choose one, it's important to stick with it. If you don't like it, to switch as early as you can, because getting comfortable with your controls is one of the biggest, most important parts of speedrunning this game. Make sure you choose the right option, because it's definitely going to matter. Obviously, there are advantages to controller keyboard. There are a few tricks that are controller exclusive, and that generally has to do with either the angles on the control stick or just the camera panning. However, the camera panning doesn't actually do too much. It's really only for the Droid Factory drop and warp that matters an extensive amount. So if you take a look at the screen right now, you will be seeing Feed 1, which is one of the more interesting, complex 1P2C rooms, performed on both controller keyboard and double keyboard. And you can see there are quite a few differences in how you will be holding the controllers. However, it doesn't really matter too much. I want to stress that it's important to choose whatever you're most comfortable with. For example, E. Roadhouse chose keyboard as he had a pretty long history playing games on the keyboard and mouse. However, I had more of a history playing games on the controller, so I chose that as my input device. Although you may notice there are some differences, at the end of the day, it's really just going to come down to how much time you put in to the one you prefer. So one important thing about 1P2C, which is definitely a staple of the LEGO games, specifically this game, is that it enables quite a few big skips and time saves that you would otherwise not be able to do. And this is why I definitely recommend getting comfortable with 1P2C for any runner who picks up this game. Speeder Skip, for example, is a 4-minute time save that is really just a quick few seconds of 1P2C, but it allows for a massive skip to be enabled. And that's why it's important to understand how to use 1P2C effectively, because it is really the heart of this game, speedrunning it at even a mid or high level. You'll see some of the more interesting and complex 1P2Cs on screen here, and I will quickly talk about the different ways to hold your controller, or perhaps even position your hands on the keyboard. So a lot of people for double keyboard will like to use either the arrow keys or the number pad for their right hand and WASD for their left hand. Other people will use IJKL, and that's completely acceptable, just whatever works for you. Some keyboards do have an issue where when you are trying to hold down multiple keys at once, specifically this arises when you have a double keyboard setup, because you're holding down, sometimes up to 6 keys at once. You won't be able to actually hold all those keys down at once and have them register on the keyboard. Now, if this is an issue because of ghosting on your keyboard, that's really something that you're just going to have to get around. There's no fix for that, unfortunately. And for the controller keyboard setup, it's most common to hold your controller with your right hand using your index finger on the joystick and, the right side of your hand on the buttons. And you would use your left hand on, most commonly the WASD keys. However, there are setups involving using the controller on your left hand, using your pinky for the joystick, and, using the arrow keys on your right hand as keyboard. For double controller, this is where it gets a little tricky. There are quite a few setups that you can use. The most common one, though, is just using your right and left hand on the 2 controllers respectively, and incorporating both of those controller keyboard setups that I explained just previously. In terms of the actual controllers that are recommended, it's typically recommended that you use an Xbox controller, usually an Xbox One controller, just because the PlayStation controllers can be a little weirder to use. However, it's really down to preference. Some people use a Switch Pro controller, it's just whatever is most comfortable for you. There are a couple things that are important to keep in mind when you're either playing on a controller or a keyboard. Controller can have some weird issues with calling back in and getting stuck, and this can happen if you try to call in or press any button on the controller, which is what calls in your controller, when they're dropped out and unable to come back onto the screen. It's pretty common in ship levels, and it's important to take note of it. It is explained in some of the tutorials coming up. It's important to make sure that you're not calling in when your controller player cannot actually be on screen, as that will definitely mess you up. Now, if that happens, all you have to do to fix that is just press F1 to call back in on player 1 on keyboard. Either drop out and call back in on controller, or go to control setup and manually switch to controller. Now, of course, going to control setup is pretty slow, so you don't want that to happen during a run. So during a run, it's usually risky enough, but worth it enough to just drop out player 1 and hope that you'll call back in on controller immediately. Now, the other important thing about keyboard is that when you are holding any key, you cannot call in. This happens if your main input device is keyboard. So, for example, calling in a controller or a keyboard when you have a keyboard player in, you will need to let go of all inputs to press F2 or F1, whatever it may be. This is explained a little bit in the pod race tutorial, but it's important to keep in mind as a keyboard player. It is something that will become subconscious eventually, but it's definitely important. One other thing with controller is that you will experience a few redrop-ins during the game. Those are pretty much covered. There are certain spots where it's unavoidable, like the room 2 of Camino.
Here are a couple useful resources that are very helpful for speedrunning TCS. The first one is LiveSplit. This is just the splitting software that mostly everyone uses. It is only a Windows native, so if you have Mac or Linux, you'll have to use some other software. But there's just a downloads tab right here, and then you can just click this link to download it. And then OBS Studio and Streamlabs OBS, these are just recording softwares, so you can record footage for your game for submissions on the leaderboard. So these are download links for your operating system, and then Streamlabs and just regular OBS Studio are pretty much the same thing. There's just slight differences. So once you've downloaded LiveSplit and downloaded the splits from speedrun.com, you'll take notice of our route on the splits. So we start on episode 1, and then we do episode 2, then we skip episode 3 and go to 4, then episode 6, 3, and 5. So our main reasoning for this is for save times, and then red bricks and cutscene times. So we start on episode 1 because negotiations is the only level we have unlocked, and we have to play it to unlock every other level. And then it's just faster to just keep going through episode 1. And we don't grab any red bricks in episode 1. And we do want to save cancel all the way through episode 1, so you're not going to save on your files at this time. And then after Darth Maul, we're going to watch the finished story cutscene and then head on over to Bounty Hunter Pursuit. And then in episode 2, we're going to continue save canceling through that as well. And then in Gunship Cavalry, we're going to grab the red brick in that level, and that red brick is for exploding blaster bolts. This is maybe the most important red brick in any percent. Saves a lot of time throughout the rest of the run. And then after Count Dooku, we're going to watch the finished story cutscene. And then we're going to head on over to the shop and buy exploding blaster bolts, and then head into Secret Plans in episode 4. In episode 4, we grab the red brick in Junland Wastes with the Out of Bounds, and then we'll continue save canceling all the way until Rebel Attack. And now this is where we stop save canceling. At the end of Rebel Attack, we're going to hit the finished story cutscene, save our game, and then wait for the game to save, and then reset the game. Then we're going to load the game back up, load the same file, and then we'll spawn in the cantina. So then we'll just head over to the shop and buy Fast Force that we grabbed in Junland. Then head on over to episode 6. Episode 6, now you have saves, so you don't have to worry about save canceling. And then you'll grab the red brick into the Death Star for infinite torpedoes. And then after the finished story cutscene and into the Death Star, you're going to wait for the game to save again, and then reset your game. And you'll spawn into the cantina, and you'll head on over to episode 3 after you've loaded the file, of course. You'll grab the red brick in Battle Over Coruscant for Vehicle Smart Bomb, and then that's the only red brick you grab in episode 3. Continue playing through that, and then you'll reset after Darth Vader, after the finish story button, and after you've saved the game. And then you'll head on over to the shop again and buy Infinite Torpedoes and Vehicle Smart Bomb in the same shop split. And then you'll head on over to episode 5 for Hoth Battle, and you'll have all the important extras in episode 5, and the timing stops when you lose control in Bespin, as episode 5 does have a very long end cutscene for Bespin, so it saves a lot of time to end on that episode. Yeah, that's pretty much the route.
So I'm going to explain how to reset the game effectively. Now you're going to be doing this after episodes 4, 6, and 3. Here you'll see in episode 4 reset. Basically what you're going to do is when you finish the level, you're going to go ahead and save the game. And with 2 monitors, which is the reset you'll see first, you can have your saved games folder open on the left, and of course we'll have an explanation of how to view your saved game folders, but it's just in your directory, which you can access by going to local and then LucasArts, and we'll have the path file down in the description below. And what you want to do is you want to look at the date modified on the saved game file that you are saving to, and you are going to, whenever it actually changes, the time changes to whatever your time is currently, that's when you can Alt-Tab out of the game. An additional method is to Shift-Tab, hold your cursor over the game to close it, and get ready to close it when you see that time change. And then if your cursor does happen to default back to the middle of your screen, you can just spam click if you have a bunch of icons on your desktop, or you can just open the game from a taskbar. It is recommended that you do it from the taskbar, of course, as it is a lot faster. Now, if you are doing it with one monitor, it's a little bit different because you do not have the ability to look at your saved games folder, so you're just going to be doing this as based off of feel when you think the game has saved. Now, this is just going to come down to playing the game a lot and figure out when your game saves. But definitely watch some of the runners with one monitor, such as Senor, who do reset with one monitor for a good timing on it, as you can take it pretty close if you don't want to lose a ton of time on the reset because you have one monitor.
So looking at the leaderboard, there are some very helpful resources and guides that can be of use to you when you're just starting out. So when we click the Guides tab on the left here, we've got a bunch of tutorials and spreadsheets that are very useful for starting out or just knowledge of the game. We've got the community goals sheet right here. We've got a timing sheet that has timings for every strat in the game that we do for any percent. We've got like cutscene timings here, stuff like that. The community golds sheet, we've got videos for most of the community golds for most full game categories. And then we have the skip strats ratings here, which are color coded by difficulty to learn and difficulty to execute, and these all have links for them. So those are just examples of very helpful guides that we have. And then when you click the resources tab here, We've got some useful resources. We've got a couple mods. We've got the live split timer here. We've got a frame counter right here. Here are just some save files for games. We got 100% save, a free play save, stuff like that. And then we've got direct downloads to splits that can be of use to you. And then 80% fast force route is the current route we use for any percent.
Okay, so the next thing I want to cover is the category rules. As we look at the rules here, there are a couple things to keep in mind. The first thing I want to go over is cheat codes. Obviously, we do not allow cheat codes just because they kind of make the game a little bit slower, boring, and monotonous. So cheat codes are not allowed. However, we do pick up red bricks, as was covered in story, so extras, of course, are still allowed. There is a glitch on Wii to obtain extras without purchasing them. That is known as the extras glitch. That is also banned, and lag abuse is also banned. For the most part, any way to modify the game is also not allowed, but the more important rules here are that you do need video if your run is under 4 hours. For your first run, it's not super expected to be under 4 hours. Many of the top 4 right now have had 4+, 5+, 6+ hour first runs, so it's really not a huge deal. However, it's important to keep in mind reading all of these rules because they are important. And the first one that really I want to explain is timing starting and ending. Now, timing starting is pretty simple. It's going to start when you press new game here, and you'll see the timer starts as soon as he hits new game. And as we have talked about with live split, the auto splitter should auto start the timer here. Now, if you go to the ending of the run, though, it actually ends when you lose control of your character. And this, of course, is going to be on the current route when Lando enters the Falcon. So as soon as you see these hearts disappear, that is when your timing ends, not after the cutscene, not anything like that. And if you are running on a different route, it's just whenever the level ends. So there will be an ending cutscene at the end of the level, no matter which level you choose to end on. But it doesn't matter because whenever you lose control of that character, which is just the UI disappearing, that is when the level is considered over and the run is considered finished. So really quickly, I want to cover pre-run setup. Before you get into your first run, there are obviously a couple things you need to do, and I do want to talk about each of those things. Now, the first thing I would recommend is going into a loaded save file. Obviously, if you don't have a save file yet, you're going to need to make one. Just for this situation particularly. And when you're in the cantina, you want to go to the extras, and you want to scroll all the way down to exploding blaster bullets. This is going to be power brick number 11. And you need to be on a file that is saved already. And when you do this, when you exit and go to a new game, your extras will already be on exploding blaster bolts as well. This also goes for whichever audio settings you choose. I like to put it on 1, however, it really depends on how your OBS picks it up or what you prefer. And you can, of course, adjust your effects settings. We do suggest having all effects settings off except for shadows. Shadows are pretty useful in this run. Now, if you are doing invasion cutscene skip, you want to set your refresh rate to 50. This will take a second usually, but when you do that, you are good to go. There are a couple other things you want to make sure of, though. Make sure your controls are set, and obviously if you are ready to do 1P2C, you are comfortable with that. Before you get into your first run, you want to make sure the auto splitter is working, and keep in mind the auto splitter is not going to be perfect. And remember, before you get into your first run, it's always important to just go over the things that you are a little bit unclear on, getting stuck on. It's super important just to make sure you know what you're doing, going into all the episodes, getting comfortable with the gameplay. I'm not going to tell you how much to practice before you do a run, because that's totally up to the runner, but hopefully this tutorial does help teach you guys pretty much everything you need to know about the run and the game.